Good afternoon. How is everyone doing? Good. Excellent. All right. How many of you are in charge of social media here at MSU, or in charge of like your organization's social media? Handful of people. How many of you have that as your sole job? I didn't think so. Sort of banking off of what Cliff had said earlier. I'm in the same boat. I am the program director for the Master of Arts in Educational Technology program over in the College of Education. And just like when I was a K-12 technology coordinator, I'm a jack of all trades, master of none, was what I was called quite frequently. But I'd like to say I have a little bit of expertise in a handful of areas. And as I'm talking and sharing how we use social media and what I do in my program, I want you to sort of think about your own context. So I may be speaking specifically about K-12 teachers who are my primary users of this social media, but think about who you're communicating with in your organizations as well, or groups on campus. Anyone from outside of MSU in the room? Okay, so we're going to, in MSU context here. Excellent. Also, I'm going to be posting a follow-up on my Twitter feed later on this afternoon. So if you follow @Gravesley, that's how you'll connect with that. And that's another tool I've used recently to force myself and the program to blog and get information out there. Because a lot of times we're stuck in places where we feel like we have to generate content. So what I do and what a lot of our professors do after they go out and give talks is they'll write up a quick blog post, post the slides, and then we have stuff to tweet and share. So there's your first tip. Does anyone not know about this site? I shouldn't put you on the spot like that. Does the person who created this site in this room, potentially? No? This is the MSU social media site, MSU/social. It lists all of the organizations, units, clubs, classes that are tweeting, Facebooking, YouTubing, Flickering, and I think a couple other social medias on there as well. So if you're in charge or working with the Twitter feed, social media in your organization, you'll definitely want to make sure you're listed on there. That's one of the first things, especially with MSU, to become part of this community, is to get yourself listed on the social media site. It's a quick email, and it's also a great way, as you're building the Twitter presence or the social media presence for your organizations, to connect with others on campus that are doing the same. There's all this talk that Twitter and social media is making us antisocial. I, at least in my life, have found the opposite, because I've connected with so many more people across campus via these social networks, finding common places to collaborate, or that's just from a personal standpoint, but also for helping my faculty with research, where there's a ton of organizations around the campus that have links inside of education or could be useful to my K-12 teachers, and finding out about projects and things that have been happening on Twitter and other organizations is one thing that has been beneficial for us. So get comfortable, not just where you are. It's a little warm, so it's hard to get comfortable in here. But to get comfortable, to get your feet wet on Twitter, how many of you use Twitter, either professionally or personally? So about just over half of the people in the room. How many of you have used it for less than 6 months? So a handful, or maybe less than a year? Just fairly new? Okay, so most people have used it for a while. One of the first things that I did when I started using any social media, for that matter, is to start by listening or looking, keeping your ear to the ground of what people are saying and doing about whatever it is you're talking about through your network channels. A couple sites you can use to do that. One of them is called Social Mention. If you want to keep your ear to the ground about what people are talking about, MSU MBA, for example, or the acronym for my program is MAET. I've got alerts set on Social Mention to tell me when anyone mentions Master of Arts in Educational Technology. So not just MAET, because that's very contextual just to me. The reason I put Master of Arts in Educational Technology is because that also helps me put an ear to the ground to other organizations and institutions that are talking about the degree program that we're offering. So I can see what other people are doing, other people are talking about. And Social Mention is one way to do that. Another one is Addictomatic. Another just quick, easy website you don't have to sign up for. You can pop in any sort of search term and see what people are saying in a social context. Any delicious users in the room? Handful. So just like when you're looking for something more specific, a lot of people, what's the first search tool we always go to? Google, right? But if you're looking for something very specific and out of the ordinary, or something contextual to what you do, you're much more likely to find useful things right away by going to something like Delicious or going to specific tools that are going to talk to those micro communities, whereas Google is looking for everything. Now, even though that's the case with Google, I still use it as well, but I dig down a bit, and if you look in if you go to Google, you can search specifically for blogs and things that are posted in the blogosphere, and also set alerts for that, just like you can. Does anyone have news alerts set on Google, or have seen that before? Next time you do a Google search, just look at the very bottom. Set up all different types of alerts. You can set up email, if that's what you're comfortable with, RSS, if you have a feed reader set up, and you can create a notification for each time this happens. So I have that set up, same thing, for Master of Arts in Educational Technology, for my course codes, for my professors. This helps me get a feel for what's being said out in the blogosphere. And it's really nice over the years since I've been watching this, and as Cliff said, John's going to talk a lot more about analytics. I'll talk about them a little bit. Mine are more all in my head, and that's one thing when you're a jack of all trades, it's hard to find a ton of time to articulate this, but there are tools that make that easy. It's been really great to see the searches that come up and not just see my name with things that come up on the Twitter feed, where I'm seeing students posting things and others referencing. Because as you're starting out, you will notice that you're really kind of the one generating a lot of the buzz and information, but I've seen over time how that's changed, and that's been pretty exciting to see. So the first thing, or not the first thing, one of the things that I'd like to talk about is my workflow for doing this. Because the number one thing people say is that this is a waste of time, or you're always online, you're always on Facebook, you're posting every 5 minutes. Well, I'm not really doing that. There's lots of different tools that you can use to push out your message. You can schedule tweets, you can make things link to each other so that they're posted to Twitter. And these are the tools that I use when it comes to social media in general. Most of them center around Twitter, but they all kind of connect with each other. The first thing is TweetDeck, which I'll show a screenshot of in a moment. ift.com, which is another new site, awesome, Twitter feed, and the Facebook Twitter app. How many of you use TweetDeck? Okay, how many of you use Hootsuite? How many of you use something else? The Twitter website, how many of you use the Twitter website? Well, a handful of people, okay. There's many different ways to get at Twitter. And that's, especially when I'm teaching this to my students, one of the first things that we talk about. Because when I say Twitter, every one of you has something, a different visualization. When I say Twitter, this is what I see in my head. Now, those of you that use Hootsuite, or those of you that go to the Twitter website, have a completely different view of things and how you attack. The reason I like TweetDeck is because I can manage multiple accounts. I have my own personal account, and I can manage our MAET account. And I can also set up tabs for the different hashtags or the pound signs. That's how you direct conversations in Twitter. So I can have pounds and hashtags set up. And this link, I think it goes to 20 or so screens to the right, and you can scroll back and forth. And this is sort of, I'm sort of used to be maybe still a Star Trek geek. I feel like I've got my little station set up on my side computer. So as I'm working, I can always see the blips on the screen popping up. So this is running all day long in the background. You can turn off alerts, which are really annoying because those pop at you all the time. That's when it gets distracting. But I've learned to ignore for the most part, but when I need to look over and see if anyone's mentioned or I need to respond, I can do that. It's also a nice way, going back to the keeping your ear to the ground piece, to hear the conversations that are happening and being aware of them and keeping them in one spot. Whereas if you go to the twitter.com site, it's not as easy to parse out conversations like this. Now TweetDeck may be changing because it was purchased by Twitter. So that's one thing to keep in mind. This is all going to change, and you just got to get over it because that's just the nature of things. And the next tools will be better, and you can buy the code or grab the code for the old tools and just keep using them if you want. This is a brand new site, just came out a couple months ago. called IFT, and it's beta only right now, but they're pretty good at the turnaround. I think within a day you can get an account set up. And I've been waiting for a site like this for a really, really long time. Being a techno geek worried about workflow. This makes connecting things to each other extraordinarily easily. So you can make, if I post something to the Delicious website with the tag MAET, I can set up a trigger that will make IFT post to Twitter saying the MAET program thinks that this link is, and you can even put in the words that you want it to say, thinks that this site is a good one to check out, and add the link to it. If we post pictures from our program on Flickr, post them on Flickr, and then that sends a trigger to this service that posts to Twitter and Facebook, or you can make, I think, 3,000 combinations of any of these triggers. Does that make sense? So you can streamline your workflow, and with you post once, send many type mentality. So it really strips away in terms of the time. You don't have to worry about, oh, I need to set it here, 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 and here, and post on the website once, and then you're done, and you can go on to your other tasks that you have to be good at. This was prior to IFT. It's called Twitter Feed, and I still use it for a handful of sites that I have feeding into my Twitter feed. The nice thing about this site is it does some metrics. It's hard to see on this screen, but here it'll tell you how many people actually clicked on the links that you posted. Not super duper important to me, which is why it's lower on my list, but to others that are making the case for social media, making the case to hire someone else, to manage that whole piece of communication, that's very important to keep track of. So this is one tool that does allow you to do that. And IFT, I'm sure, from what I've seen with them, they're pretty good at knowing the pulse, so I'm sure that will be something that they'll build in. And engagement, so this is sort of transitioning from using the Facebook app I was mentioning. There is a Twitter plugin for Facebook, and you can have it linked to your the social media piece for your organization that you're working with. If you also have your own Twitter feed, it gets sort of messy. I have two, so I had a friend that I work with connect her Twitter feed to our Facebook app, and so it gets a little goofy in there, but there are ways around it to make sure that you're parsing out the two. But we started out, since we're ed tech, we try to be on the cutting edge of everything. And when we first started using our Facebook page, there wasn't much engagement with the page. It was just broadcasting messages. And then Facebook changed pages to groups or whatever, right? You know, Facebook has been changing what they call things recently, and you have to upgrade your page and change it. And there wasn't much engagement going on inside of Facebook until Facebook changed recently into groups. And one of our students, we have a few different ways we offer our program. We have fully online, so students never come to campus, hybrid, and then overseas in the summer. So those students also have never connected physically with MSU. They've never been on campus. And the overseas students started a Facebook group. And then within a couple days, half of the alumni and current students were on there interacting with each other. And so that was something where they took it off on their own, and it was successful, where Cliff was talking about we just can't build these things and people will come. And we had also played around a bit with Facebook ads. Has anyone ever tried those for department-wise? And those sort of petered out as well, didn't really do much for us, didn't give us much information. We didn't get any students from it. But that was okay. We were just trying and seeing what has happened. So since Facebook switched over to groups, I'll show a little bit later a very hard to read screenshot of where we have engagement happening. So this is the cheesy planting the seed and being authentic slide. It's not going to happen right away, and that's something in the job that I have now. I started about 4 years ago, very impatiently coming in, wanting to change everything and make everything great, and I've learned maybe it's just the way the university channels work, things take a little bit of time. So seeds that were planted even 4 years ago are now starting to come and come out of the woodwork. Okay, here's a hard to read slide. What it's trying to say, and you can see a bigger version when you go to my website later. On the left-hand side is the seed that was planted by me on this overseas page, where I asked former students and students that have been overseas before to post ideas and suggestions for newbies. What do you pack? What should you expect when you're coming? Because there's this anxiety about starting a new venture. And within a day or two, there were about 14 or 15 different students generating answers and tips for fellow students. But on the other side, which is what I'd like to see more, is a student posting a video of augmented reality from, I think it's HP. They're doing some really cool new things that are free, available to teachers. And within also about a couple days, lots of work or lots of talking generated around this and around the globe. Because my student population is global, they were able to continue their what we call PLN, or personal learning network, via this social media channel. So things like that get me really, really excited. I know it's just like anecdotal evidence, but that's what I want to see when I'm looking for evidence of a social media strategy that works for our program. Students are engaging with each other. Students that have never met each other are engaging with each other, and they're continuing this passion for the subject that we've taught them, which is educational technology. So what I do when I'm tweeting things out off of our MAET Twitter site is sharing work done by student, staff, and alumni. So that's why I have my ear to the ground. Anything that's coming up, or I'm in the office, I hear things happening, I'll tweet them out. And also retweeting work done by students, staff, and alumni. So that's part of that learning how to participate and to become an authentic member of the tribe, if you want to use that word, is being authentic. And you can see right through it. I can see right through it because I've been using it for a long time. I know the lingo. And I had an incident the other day where I can't remember what was happening on Twitter, but someone mentioned, oh, I was presenting with a group of people I didn't know. And someone said, well, so-and-so should do the MAET program. And then a bunch of students jumped on the bandwagon saying, yeah, why doesn't so-and-so have this degree? And linking to our site. That made me actually a little tense, because that's not why I want to participate in the Twitterverse. Yes, I want to get students, that would be wonderful, but it almost turned into this person who already had an MA being accosted by fellow students to come to our tribe, where I kind of backed off and said, make sure that you know I was not the one generating this. I was being authentic, and I had an ear to the ground, that we're not just using this as a come to our program type of model. It really is sharing and connecting. I'm also quite frequently participate in chats around educational technology. So there's people, Alec Koros, for example, who strangely is also connected to Ethan. And you'll find once you're on Twitter, you find these really strange little connections. But Alec is a ed tech professor in Saskatchewan, and he is amazing with educational technology. And so I've connected some of my students with him. So it's not just this proprietary institutional thing either. It's participating in the conversations around your subject as well. Spelling manners, had to get that one in there. I always cringe when I see the you, your. I'm just that kind of person. And I'm not even a writing and rhetoric person, but it just bugs the heck out of me. And this happened, I don't know if anyone heard this, just happened yesterday, Georgetown. Do you see what they did? This is the Georgetown University commencement address book. They spelled university wrong. Like to all of the commencement things that went out. I know, ow, cringe. So that's a lot worse than just messing it up on Twitter, where you can delete it. But the thing when you delete tweets is that they still can show up on people's tweet decks depending on when they were and how active the other people are looking at it. So once it's out there, it's out there. And just watch those. URL shortening and tracking. There's also a lot of controversy. I'm not really one to get into controversy about what's best or worse. I just use what I use. The leaders seem to be Owly and Bitly. Those give you a lot of tracking information and metrics. I personally like Google. One of the reasons I like using the Google URL shortener is it pops in a QR code, which is like the hottest thing right now with all my K-12 teachers. And if you look around in magazines, does everyone know what a QR code is and how to scan it with a smartphone? If not, you can come see me in the back later. I'll show you how to use it. What you can do is, as you're sharing information, it automatically generates the QR code for you and then gives you the metrics with how many people scanned it and where they were from even, what countries, what browsers they were using. So it's really, really interesting data you can get by using the Google URL shortener. David Silver, I think he's at University of San Francisco or somewhere out west, wrote a great post about thick and thin tweets. And he always suggests making your tweets thick. So put lots of layers of information in there, which is a challenge and a fun challenge when we're working about with 140 characters. So for example, a thin tweet would be graduation today, Yahoo, right? Well, that doesn't really tell us much. So if I were posting that as the MAET program, okay, graduation's today. But the second tweet is a thick one. It has the pound MAET, so I'm directing the conversation at that community or branding that conversation with MAET. I'm saying where it is, it's at Breslin, where you can watch the live stream, a link to it, and I used @Steve Wozniak, so people that are interested can also follow Steve Wozniak with a click from that speech. So there's a lot of layers of thickness in there, right? People can click on the hashtag and get other tweets happening by MAET. They can go right to the live stream, and they can follow Steve Wozniak. So as you're generating your tweets, think about how you're going to be talking and the language you're going to be using to make them thick. I'll go briefly over the analytics. This is one that I use. It's called Archivist, and also a free one. And the really cool thing about this one is you can you have to start by setting up an archive. So it's not going to go back and give you data. So if you go and set this up today, that's when your archive will start. And I started an archive back in March, and I can see the top users of the pound MAET hashtag. So the big green one is me. So I'm still a good portion of the chatter and the conversation that's happening. And then the MAET itself is a big user of the MAET hashtag. But we can see, what is that, about a third of the conversation is being generated by others outside of me and the organization. And it's really neat to watch and to see who these people are. And what's kind of interesting to me is once we get over to the ones on this side, is some of those people aren't even in my program. They're not students. So that's a really fascinating thing for me to follow. Oh, stop, thank you. Sorry, I didn't see that down there. I just need to wave. Okay, so I have the link to some other places. Clout is another one. Don't really like it, but what they talk about is very interesting to keep in mind in terms of your score and reach. Those are good ideas. Managing followers, and then, like I said, most important thing to remember, it's all going to change. Just go with the flow. There's a huge community of people here on campus willing to help you out with it. And if it's not huge, you have me. So you're all connected to me now since you've been in the room, and I'm happy to help out. Questions? Oh, I did. Okay, good.
Why does it seem that a lot of education majors and your field has taken on social media so strongly?
I think because a lot of teachers sometimes feel isolated in their classroom, so this gives a really wide network of people to connect with. And I always use specials, or if you have any kids in elementary, you know what specials are: art class, music class, computer class. A lot of times those teachers are the only ones in the building in their subject area, so they really don't have anyone to bounce ideas off of. And so some of the music chats that are happening or art have really opened up and expanded the room or the classrooms for teachers to talk with each other. Yeah.
Do you have any idea how your efforts map actually to the bottom line numbers that the school uses for?
Yep, in our program we do, in our department application, ask what was your primary reason for coming to the program. And over the past handful of years, we've had 5 students actually cite that Twitter, our use of Twitter, is why they've come to the program. So we're starting to track that a little bit more. Or the other one is word of mouth. Word of mouth is the #1 reason. So whether or not that does mean Twitter as well, but I'm not exactly sure, but it is contributing to why people value our program. At least why they say they value our program. Cliff?
So one of the things I'm interested in is what you think makes a post authentic, right?
Mhm.
Because I just kind of made that up when I was talking about it. So like, you know, what, and others in the room probably have a better sense than I do for sure. But what is an authentic tweet?
I think like I said, if I'm posting anything about registration deadlines, I feel authentic. If it's come to my program and start, I feel a little slimy because I feel like I'm selling something, whereas instead of building a community and people wanting to come rather than forcing it on them. So that's in terms of those types of tweets. But I think genuine is the information I'm posting. My imagined audience would be interested in hearing that as well. But that's a good thing to articulate. There's a whole article I could write for that. You want to write it too? Yeah, let's do that. Any other idea? What makes tweets authentic? When you're composing your tweets in your head, what makes you think this is authentic? This is something people want to hear.
I know, but something that doesn't sound authentic. Join us. Whenever
Yeah.
I say join us, it sounds like join us, and then it just sounds creepy.
Right. Because we're academic, right? We don't want to be like, even though we are in a business, you just don't feel, it just doesn't sit quite right, at least with me.
Sometimes I feel tricky though, since I also manage our department Twitter account. The authenticity is actually I'm struggling with because I would like to sell an event so people can come to the library.
Right.
On the other hand, I don't also want to sound so cheesy.
No, I think events are a little different though. It's because it's more in like the library resources. Like you want people to use these databases that MSU is paying a lot of money for. So we want to share these resources. You want to come to our event because the people that follow. I know what would be inauthentic in that is if you were posting something and then tagged it with a hashtag that really didn't relate to your subject area. So for example, with me, if I went, say, join my program, #EdTech, there's a pretty tightly knit EdTech community that's not MSU. That would be slimy because I'm pointing that conversation, selling something to that community. Whereas from the business standpoint, that would be the smart thing to do because then that means you have an ear to the ground, you know the channels of communication that people are using, and you can direct conversations that way.
I wonder the extent to which, as a user, and looking at the tweets, the extent to which you rate something as slimy or credible based on whether the source is an individual or it's an office or a unit somewhere.
True, yeah,
And
that's a
I sort
very
of
true
have
one.
expectations that, if I'm getting something from the library and it's not from Ronti specifically, I guess I'm willing to sort of say, oh, this is going to try to give me information about what they have to offer or something.
Right.
And I'll look at it or I won't. But in my head, I've got sort of a shorthand way of prioritizing and categorizing that.
There's a really good study in one of my recent conferences where people were twice as unlikely to friend or to unfollow a organization as they were an individual, even when the content was exactly the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very interesting.
Interesting.
Very interesting.
I find it stands between a technical language versus a creative language. When something falls too technical, people get bored by it. When it falls too creative, it sounds too pithy and weird. So when you feel like you know enough about the subject you're tweeting about, like you know all the hashtags, the appropriate, all the subject matter that's right, that's where you want to be, not guessing on one or the other.
And I think that depends on who you're talking to. Like if you were talking to programmers, I'd want it to be more on the technical side rather than generic. I'd probably just fly through that tweet.
One of the things that's interesting that's happening is some folks are watching the video feed on this.
Oh,
And I'm
cool. What are they
starting to get
saying?
comments back. One of our community members, Kelly Sattler from the library, asked me to throw in that for her, an unauthentic tweet for me is follow me on Facebook.
Yeah, because it seems like it's all about how many followers you have. And I've never, ever used that as a metric of how good our tweets are, whereas businesses may, because it's, what's the deal with spam? You have to send out 12 million spam messages to make $100 or something. That's like a volume issue, whereas with what we're doing, it's not necessarily about that. Any other back channel? The back channel is a whole nother presentation that we could do. Hopefully they're all good things being streamed. He's saying yes, but not telling me what they are.
Cliff is posting nasty things to the back channel.
I bet, yeah. Any other questions? Thanks. We have
Thank
time?
you.
Okay.